Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Welcome Change, Ashoka's weekly news series where we meet social entrepreneurs and we hear what's working, what's next, and the role we can all play. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Mike and Mel, some very good friends as well. We've got a lot to cover today, but before we join in, just a reminder of the format. So we have 30 minutes in total today. So we'll probably chat for 15 to 20 minutes, likely 20 if I'm being truthful. And then we'll turn to some questions before we wrap up. So if you're really curious about something that we discuss, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So on that note, let's get started. The Olympics will start in 2 days time on the 26th of July and run till the 11th of August. It will quickly become evident that sport has great potential to positively impact societies all around the world. I think there's 206 countries represented in the Olympics and then 184 at the Paralympics. Sporting events can provide a platform to educate on the challenges facing humanity and advocate for solutions. However, without active attention and stewardship, we all know that sports' impact on the world can also be very negative, especially after these events have finished and moved on, when I think I wouldn't be on my own when we say we often question the legacies of these events. For this reason, I'm really keen to explore with Mike and Mel how sport can affect positive social change if responsibility is built into the sporting ecosystem, and how sporting events like the Olympics can create a positive impact in the host cities, driving access, inclusion, and representation. So, Mel, on that note, how would you define a responsible sporting world, and why is it really important to focus on this?
It's a great question and a great discussion, very, very topical, obviously. I'm a great believer in sport, the power of sport. I mean, Mandela said, in his famous quote about how powerful sport can be, and I've seen that myself. But I think if sport internationally is to be responsible, it has to get the balance right between the high performance, which we're going to see at the Olympics and which we're going to enjoy massively, and then the grassroots. So it needs to be fairly distributed all around, and that's how you have real impact. In this world at the moment, the world's becoming very divisive. We're in one camp or another, and sport does the opposite. The Olympics doing the opposite. It's bringing people together for 2 weeks to look at the value of sport as something that brings about peace and togetherness in a way with great values. I think where the events need to kind of think more closely is around legacy, as you mentioned. What is the legacy that's going to be left in Paris and France, and indeed the world afterwards? And sometimes I think this isn't thought through properly from the outset. Often comes up, nearer the time, oh goodness me, what's the legacy? Rather than right at the beginning, when cities bid for it, okay, what's the legacy going to be? Which should be the raison d'etre in the first place.
Thanks, Mel. Mike, just jumping on to that, can you share any examples of where you've sort of seen like a big sporting event or like the Olympics in the past, where you've seen like good examples of things that have led to positive social changes, especially in some of these host cities potentially? Mike?
Hey. Oof. I'm not sure. I mean, I think about London and the Olympics, and I know that there was a groundswell of volunteers. There was a lot of people engaged, but I mean, the stories post London Olympics were very much with gentrification of certain areas. People were left sort of that Stratford was sort of squeezed out of people that called it home. So I'm not too sure about these large events have reached the potential of it. I think sport in general has done it organically, we've seen where it can question and raise awareness of social issues, and sport is a great medium. But in terms of a legacy, I don't think it's yet to reach its potential, hence being excited by what you're doing, Kelly, and obviously Mel's work with the Homeless World Cup in terms of, well, how can sport not only have this amazing event and euphoria and impact the people's lives that were part of it, but leave a legacy, like end homelessness in cities, for example, as I know Mel's taking forward with the Homeless World Cup as a vehicle, and you with the sport for change making. But no, in summary, obviously, I think you guys are a little bit closer to some of these larger events than I have been over the years, but I don't think it's reached its potential.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Mel, just on another matter, I watched this morning over breakfast. I saw the new Nike advert, and the fact that it could take us in a winning at all costs sort of thing. How can elite athletes sort of use their platform to advocate for social change and sort of promote these responsible practices? Mike, I'll give this to Mel, and then I'll come back to you. But how can athletes use their platform, Mel?
Well, I mean, I think in this day and age, with social media and so on, the athletes at the high performance level have fantastic platforms to give out messaging about the power of sport and what it can do. I think, and coming from this Olympics, as I was saying earlier, what it should be about is all of us coming together from different nations, from different backgrounds, and celebrating sport and participating with each other in a fair way. That's the message I think that needs to come out of Paris, that actually we need to dial down the rhetoric in the world at the moment and work together to find peaceful solutions, and that can be done through sport. That's the message I think that athletes should be giving, and they have got a responsibility. A lot of people would say, well, no, they're just athletes, so they're just getting on being athletes, and they have to concentrate on that and so on. And that's right, because that's their profession, and there's usually a small window before they, it's the end of their career. But within that time, I think they do have some responsibility, like all of us do in the world, to be talking about things in a constructive and positive way. And the Olympics presents that opportunity. That then becomes kind of ethical issues, because as soon as, and I know the Olympics and FIFA and so on talk about this, because you can have some athletes that are campaigning around one particular issue, which we might all agree is a good thing. And if you're going to allow one athlete to do that, then you have to allow all athletes to do it. And another athlete might have an opposite view. And I think that gets into a problematical area, which is an open ethical question. But in the meantime, I would be arguing that it's all about the athletes advocating for sport in general. Sport is something, it's a force for good, done in the right way. It can really impact society.
Thanks, Mel. And I think I mean, we're all nodding in agreement there. It was quite a powerful statement that you've made there, and I think we'll touch upon that at the end. Back to you, Mike. Just, how can cities that host like the Olympics and these major sporting events, and there are lots of major sporting events, how can the infrastructure be built, really, in your view, to benefit the local communities in the long term? And I'm particularly interested in, from your side with Play Verto, like how can you measure the impact as well, so that you can actually see the difference that sport is making?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it for me. It's about data, primary data, and I feel like these large sporting events in any host city has a unique opportunity to get a lay of the land, go out via social enterprises, NGOs, community groups, schools, and really understand what are the prevailing issues affecting that city. And then for me, the athletes and the host city can start to look at how sport can be an advocate for changing those issues without forming an opinion on whether they're the right issues or wrong issues. Because as Mel said, if we're going to allow the Olympics to get political, then we have to be prepared for alternate views depending on which countries you're in favour of, which countries you're not, which issues you're in favour of, which issues you're not. But sport in itself and the transferability of the skills you learn in sport can help us all become change makers. And I think that's the bit that a city has the opportunity to do. I reflect on the project that we did with Nike, where Nike wanted to look at sport and its connection to environmental activism. And we did a pilot in LA, downtown LA, classic sort of underrepresented kids that were part of this group. And, you know, single parent families not doing too well academically at school. But they self-assessed that the skills they were practicing as a runner, set big goals, breaking down into small ones, be prepared to endure, constantly train, be resilient, be part of a tribe. They're the same skills to be a climate activist. And that pivot, that light bulb moment for that individual runner, for me, makes you see that the skills I'm developing through sport equip me to be a change maker in any other area of my life. And I feel like that's where these legacy pieces can be. Like, let's understand what the community is thinking and feeling, what's their realities, and then how do we showcase sport as a vehicle for change? Not that we'll change it for you, but we can equip you at a community level to start to play a role from the grassroots up. And data is a fantastic evidence-based as well as catalyst, because if I play and share and I see the results of what I've shared compared to everybody else, that's transparency, that's accountability, and it's my opportunity to then use that in conversations locally. But then if the host city does it again at the end, or does a follow-up 6 months later, and we see a shift, again, that reinforces to me at an individual level, I've been part of that change. I'm a change maker. Look what we've done. Where we're going to turn our attention to next. So it plays into each, you know, classic sort of theory of change.
Yeah, thanks, man. Mel, just thinking of, you know, I think it was your previous role with UK sport. What role do like sporting governing bodies play in like the decision making and setting policies and that will promote responsibility of, you know, sport at all levels and encourage like these meaningful legacies to be created? I know you said like who makes these decisions. Can you give us a bit of an insight into that?
Yeah, good question. Certainly, you have bodies like UK Sport, and I was chair of Sport Scotland, so the sports body in Scotland, and we work with the governments, you know, in terms of policy development, and that's changing all the time. And then you have the international sports federations and then national sports bodies. So there's a lot of administrative bodies, if you like, there who's charged with holding the ethics, I would argue, of what sports all about. And so on both the boards I was on, there was a lot of discussion actually about ethics and about the importance of that sports hold, because we all love sport, we all understand the power it has, and if that gets corrupted, then we're all not doing our job. So there's a lot of discussion on that. I think you can't get away from the fact that sport's part of society. It's part of why the society issues go on there. I think if you look at, let me pick on two areas. One would be, say, racism, which is unfortunately in a lot of our societies. But sport is actually taking some lead on this. Football in particular, you know, they have disciplinary action now if racism appears in football. At the same time, they have marketing, you know, around their pitch boards and so on and so forth, anti-racist, and then the whole education programs. If you look at disability, if you look at the Paralympics and what it does in terms of including people who previously, you know, even only 20, 30 years ago were excluded, sports provided this lead in saying, hey, these are people who should be included in our world. So I think we do a lot at that kind of policy administrative level. Could more be done? Sure, of course. I mean, it's, you know, I think you said in your introductory remarks, sometimes sport gets into a bad space and gets bad reputation in terms of some of the governance, and we have to take that on. But I think that the general, I would say that the sector is positive and alive to these issues because it has a love of sport.
Yeah, and just further So looking forward, really, and with great hope and optimism, really. What are your hopes for the future of like the Olympic Games and other major sporting events in terms of like creating these meaningful legacies and having that impact? What would Mel like to really see in the next sort of
yeah.
year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more. I mean, sport is kind of growing. I mean, more and more people are watching it. It's getting more and more people engaged, which is fantastic, and it can link into other across policies. So, for example, in Europe, there's a whole issue about obesity, and sport. Obviously, if you get so we need to get people active, even if that's just walking around to stop a kind of a budget disaster happening in the health service, let alone our own individual health. And if we can all get more active, then it's going to be better for society as a whole. And of course, sport has a role to play in that. So we need to be kind of talking up where sport, how you can join in, whatever, you can be rubbish at it, and how it doesn't matter how old you are, you can join in sport and have a good time. That's the messages you need to be getting across and linking with other parts of society. So sport isn't just in its own silo. I would argue you probably need more investment in that from government if it was to look at a cross portfolio plan. So that will be one thing. And then I just think we need to be more, just a bit more smart in terms of delivery. So, as you know, I work with homeless people, work for a long time. I work with the Homeless World Cup, and I just cannot understand why, in Paris, you have the Olympics coming along, which have been planned for ages. So what's happening? The police are sweeping the homeless people off the street so that nobody can see them, putting them away. Then they'll probably come back afterwards. In the next Olympics in Los Angeles, where there's a massive problem, and I will be arguing, right, we've got 4 years. Why can't we make an intervention for these homeless people with the Olympics coming up so that actually they can be a part of it, maybe have jobs, maybe get some qualifications so that we can participate in it, so that, the Olympics is coming in and you're solving the problem. So looking at it that way, and as I was saying earlier, thinking about what a potential legacy might be, rather than saying, hey, this is a huge event's coming in and we're going to clear the space and then everybody can return to normal afterwards. Actually, we can be much smarter about that. So whilst I'm a big fan of the Olympics and I shall be watching it avidly, and I know it's got power, we could do better.
Yeah, Mike, anything to add there, or anything you would like to see that obviously there's the impact and the data piece, which you might want to touch on again, but what are your aspirations or hopes for the future?
I think building upon what Mel said, I think this, if you're going to host the World Cup, host the Olympics, host the Euros, whatever it may be, there should be an upfront commitment to a legacy. And in fact, it should be part of you. You can't host it if you're just gonna. Because I remember in London, they did the same. They, all the homeless people was moved to one side where they normally sleep. They put those. Do you remember those little metal sort of spikes? So it would just like shift, clear it out. And for me, it's actually there needs to be a commitment to address those social issues and other issues. You won't solve them all, but there needs to be an active commitment that if you're going to host an event, that you're going to say up front, these are the issues we're hoping to address. This is the plan. This is who we're working with. And obviously, Ashoka's Sport for Change Making has got some really great ideas and strategies to do that, right? Really launch things based on the learning from social entrepreneurs, fund the local community to be at the heart of driving these solutions, measure it. So I think it's not just about who puts the most money into these things anymore. There needs to be some form of, if you're going to do it, it's got to be done well, and the societal issues need to be built into it and not a secondary or third thought once you've got it. And then the only other thing around the programs that Mel said, I think we need to go further on that, because I agree with you, sport and football in particular. I'm a huge football fan. We've got such an opportunity, but, I'm a Chelsea fan, and I see weekly at Stamford Bridge the negatives of fans, certain views, what they chant. That we need to go further. We've just seen Enzo Fernandez, who's won the Copa, performing a racist chant with his teammates. And I don't inherently believe it's because they're racist. I think there's a lack of education, and it needs to be rethought through, and that needs to come forward so that young fans, old fans see it. Not just repercussions, oh, they're banned for 12 games. As much as I do think you need to have repercussions, it's about what next. How do we ensure that doesn't happen again? How do we ensure that in the euphoria of celebrating, you're not doing it derogatory to any other nation or race or person? So the education's got to go further. I think the main bodies have got to step up.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because they're all great points, I suppose just my wish as well is that sport opens the door to social entrepreneurs and social, that social value, because it can't just be consultants that maybe don't know so much about this that are involved in it. That it's got to be wide and it's got to be inclusive of this. So that was my bit of a wish, really, that we do get welcomed into these conversations. Just touching on Mel before, right at the start, I think you said something about, it's not just the responsibility of the athletes, it's not just the responsibility of like the governing bodies, but it's everyone's responsibility here. How can, just a quick one, how can viewers and like the fans sort of these major events really contribute to the movement going forward?
To my mind, I think it's just a question of joining in and not, wouldn't be surprised to hear me saying that as a social entrepreneur. That's how we could change. It's all about doing little things. So it's about not being passive. So we go to the events and then we go home. But you should be going, right, okay, well, actually, I'm getting this message, for example, about not being active, and I'm not very active. So therefore, I'm going to start walking a lot more. That's what I'm going to do. Some of the issues that Michael's raising there about racism, for example, as I was saying earlier, I think the situation's really improved in football. Football authorities have done a lot and are doing a lot, but it's not gone away. So we should be calling it out all the time. That's our role as spectators and viewers, is kind of saying, hey, this is just not acceptable. It's not acceptable in sports, not acceptable anywhere. And, wherever it comes, be it in the club or, it's, reporting to the police or whatever it is. And then we should be investing in education. So we should be taking our responsibility. If we are a teacher, for example, well, then it's about teaching kids about this. If we're sports people, about being responsible, governing bodies, dealing with it, etc. All of us have got a role to play. And I think that's a key thing. Sometimes, I believe that as citizens, we're just too passive and we need to, and leave things to everybody else. We need to, if we want to create this change, we need to make interventions ourselves, even if they're tiny.
Yeah, great. Well, at that point, I think I've seen some questions coming in, so hopefully we can just answer a few of them. So the first one is, what are some patterns you're seeing emerging in the global sporting ecosystem in the last few years that you find especially encouraging? Mike, Mel, either one of you really on this one.
I'll jump in and Mike can go. But I think the thing that's encouraging for me that I've seen sort of kind of working in the governing bodies and so on is actually this understanding that the grassroots and the high performance are linked. And previously you seem to separate. So sports all about the high performance. It's about the athletes. It's about the medal winners at the Olympics, and that's all it is. And grassroots was something else. And I could see the convergence. My line on this always is that it's the head and the heart of sport. You can't do one without the other. If you don't have a head, you don't have a heart. If you don't have a heart, etc. And they work together. And I think sport, there's definitely a pattern for a greater understanding about that compared with what it was, and that's continuing. Is it perfect? Of course not. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having these sort of discussions. But it's a much greater understanding, and I think that's a positive.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Mike, I think there might be one here for you, really. Is there any sort of social return on investment metric that people are talking about, like for these big events, like, or is there something akin to that in terms of like the economic contribution it makes to the local city? And are people thinking about this or doing it properly?
Well, I think it's based on where I started with the first question. I just don't think we've reached that potential yet, because I feel like the front runner with the growth of sport has been its economic value. And obviously there's many social entrepreneurs within our Ashoka family that have looked at the social value of sport and have done wonderful initiatives as a result. But these large scale events, I think, can do a lot more. And I think, again, it's down to measurement and how courageous you want to be to get a baseline level of data, awareness, participation, how people think and feel, knowledge, nutrition, how active you are. If you get that baseline data from citizens in a host city, and then you see how the Olympics in this case has shifted that's incredible. And I think that can be done so well, but we're yet to see it. And I think there's a bit of fear, because I think, if you're a host city, do you really want this data to be front and center of what the current reality is? But I think if you treat it as a learning exercise with a true focus on, we're going to understand the reality and we're not going to shy away from it, and then we want to change it, and that's the ambition, and this is how, that is bold. And I think then citizens will buy into that even more. So it's not difficult to do that. It just needs the will, I think. And again, so many cool ways you can do it now through QR codes and sponsors and brands. We see how powerful they are when they're driving economic value. So to put an ounce of that to driving social value could be done. And if I could just quickly loop back to the previous question, I agree with Mel on the grassroots, but the one thing I think we can all be encouraged by is the gender shift in sport, and the growth of the women's game across the sports has been incredible, even to the extent of in my lifetime. At my school, there wasn't many, when I was at school, there wasn't a girls' football team. It was very classic. Girls play netball, boys play football. And now, I look around the streets and you've got young girls wearing Messi t-shirts and playing football, and grassroots. Even here in Egypt, you've got academy teams for girls. And I think that sport has done an amazing thing of giving all genders the belief that I can be involved in any sport I want.
Yeah, and even little boys wearing England shirts with the female players on the.
Absolutely.
To see. Last, I think we've just got a chance for one more. Mel, I think this one is for you. With regards to homeless people being, cleared out of the way for these events, Lauren's sort of agreeing that more could be done to involve these individuals. But the question that she's asking is could a policy commitment to be put in place that a percentage of the revenue gained from some of these large events help towards homeless initiatives and charities in the future?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, you could have charities, initiatives, and some of the biggest sporting bodies are connected to UNICEF and so on. But I think in the issue of homelessness specifically, it's these events are clearing people off the street, so there's a direct impact of these events on those people. That's why I'm raising it. And I think it's a good question, and I would be saying why not? And again, it's about thinking about the legacy. Mike's touched on that, and I agree strongly with what he's saying. If we're going to have this event in Paris or whatever, they should have had this discussion 10 years ago. It means that there's going to be an issue around the homeless people that are on the street. How do we deal with that? So let's put some finance towards a special program to get homeless people into houses as part of the initiative. Now, I don't know how much that would cost, but that would be the initiative as part of it. And there could be other things going on in the city as well, like education programs or getting kids active, getting them onto cycles. There was a big cycle championship, world championships in Scotland last year, which was hugely successful. Impact of that still being worked out, but I suspect it's quite significant. So it's all about kind of thinking these things through in the early days. And the reason I would be mentioning Los Angeles is because there's a huge problem in Los Angeles, as we all know, of homelessness. So here's an opportunity 4 years out to say, well, we're not going to repeat what happened in Paris, okay? We're going to do this in a different way. X amount of budget needs to be put towards that. Where are we getting that from? Who's going to deliver it? And let's see the impact in 4 years' time. Now, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something really, really constructive and positive to do, which everybody could celebrate?
Yeah. Well, we're at past already, and there's the questions are now hotting up. So I think we'll encourage everybody to sort of get in touch afterwards, because there's some really interesting ones that come through. Just before I wrap up, Mike, any particular very quick one sport that you're really interested in seeing this year in the Olympics that maybe wouldn't be the traditional ones? Break dancing. Mel, any?
For me, I just love all sport, you know, and so obviously, like Mike, I'm a football guy, but you know, I love the athletics and some of the cycling, but some of these new sports, you know, kind of some of the cycling events, are just phenomenal, and rock climbing, you know, climbing up the wall, just fantastic. I just kind of get mesmerized by all and in awe of these fantastic athletes, some of whom are much younger than me.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up this really insightful discussion, and I'm sure we could have carried on for much longer, I really want to sort of extend my deepest gratitude to you both for joining us today, particularly when you have such busy schedules. Your sort of experiences and perspectives on all of these things have really provided us with a sort of a comprehensive understanding of, you know, how sport can really be a catalyst for positive change, and how, you know, responsibility really needs to be embedded in its very fabric, really. So thanks to the audience as well for engaging and some of the questions, and we'll look to follow up on them. As we look forward to the Olympics, let's carry forward some of the lessons we've learned today. Let's champion for the cause of responsibility, advocate for sustainable practices. I know there's some cardboard beds in the Olympic village, and let's work together really to ensure that the legacies that we create from these sporting events are really meaningful and enduring in the future. In closing, I'd like to invite everyone to continue this conversation well beyond today's session and engage with your communities, support responsible initiatives, keep pushing for change, really, step up and be a change maker, and help us create what we want to see in the world of sports in the future. So thanks to everyone for joining us. Enjoy your day, and enjoy the Olympics that are coming up. Take care.
Bye-bye.